Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we're fishing a small Arkansas lake and it is blowing. It's like 20 to 30 mile an hour sustained winds with like gusts to 40. I do not recommend anybody fish under these conditions, especially on larger lakes. But today we're on a small lake. I can get out of the wind and I really never have to traverse into the rougher side of the lake today. So we're safe and we're having a good time. We're catching some fish and that's always good. But today on this video, I wanted to give you guys some tips that I've learned over the years on how to maintain good boat positioning on super windy days like today, utilizing two tools that most bass anglers have known about for years now, and most anglers have them on their boats. Not everybody, and there's nothing wrong with having a low-cost setup that doesn't have all the gadgetry, but it sure does make it easier to battle these type of conditions with these two things. And those two things are the two power pole blades that I have on the back of the boat and the GPS enabled trolling motor I have on the front. I've got the Lowrance Ghost, which I just started using this year and I absolutely love it. And it's got the GPS capabilities to be able to hit anchor mode and sit in place. So using these two pieces of equipment on bass boats nowadays, it's actually really easy to approach a day like today and still catch a lot of fish and have a lot of fun and not get so frustrated you got to put it on the trailer. So my main tip really has to do with utilizing these two pieces of equipment, and it depends on the depth zones that you're fishing on that day. If I'm fishing shallow water, I tend to relate to the wind a little bit different than I do with deep water. For instance, in shallow water, I really like to use the wind to my advantage. I like to allow the wind to push me in shallow water as long as I have power poles, because what I can do is I can go all the way into the back of a creek or all the way up onto a flat that I want to fish, and then let the wind kind of drift me down that area, if that's even an option. I mean, it may be a wind angle on a certain stretch that just isn't working. Maybe it's blowing me into the bank or something. But whenever possible, I really like to use the wind to my advantage. Right now, I've got the wind coming into my stern on this shallow flat. It's coming perfectly down this stretch to where it's not pushing me into the shoreline, and I can control my direction a little bit with the Ghost, but the power poles are allowing me to stop in place and still keep the bow of the boat pointed where I want it to be. So in shallow water situations where your power poles can reach the bottom, use the wind to your advantage and move with the wind. Allow the wind to push you and stop with the power poles. That's going to allow you to maintain the best boat positioning possible, especially when you're coming up to cover and you want to pick it apart. Another thing that it does, if you're using the power poles primarily, is it allows you to be much more stealthy. If you're just using the trolling motor occasionally to make little turns and stuff like that, point your bow into a piece of cover or something, it's going to allow you to be a lot more stealthy out there in shallow water, which is really important. Now, the opposite situation when I'm fishing deeper water, when I'm trying to maintain good boat positioning, I'm pretty much always pointed into the wind. So deeper water where the power poles are obsolete and they just won't touch bottom, that's when I like to use the trolling motor, primarily the Ghost, and point into the wind. The Ghost is super powerful and it will pretty much handle just about any type of wind or current, so I'm not worried about that. And another thing that pointing into the wind does is that when you do have to hit anchor mode on the pedal, it'll keep you in place, pointed upwind. Now, if you're going with the wind out deep, every time you hit anchor mode, it's gonna be turning the boat around, to point into the wind. That's just how it's gonna work. Another thing that happens if you're going with the wind out deep is that you're just not gonna be able to fish slow enough through an area. You're just gonna be blowing through an area, and a lot of times your boat will kind of turn sideways with the wind. You know, if you have a current that's going the opposite direction, that's very common for it to kind of, you know, go sideways, and that's never a good thing. So another thing that you can do though, if you do have to, for whatever reason, go with the wind out deep, you can still use the power poles as an option to keep the stern of the boat pointed into the wind in a lot of situations, because you can create a lot more drag. So put them all the way down in that deeper water. That'll create enough drag to kind of even things out and keep the stern pointed into the wind a little bit more. So power poles can be useful out deep, and they even make drift paddles. Power pole makes those drift paddles that are real popular up north that kind of replace drift socks and things like that. The whole idea is that when you're fishing shallow, lean on the power poles a little bit more for boat positioning and for moving down a bank, and use that wind to your advantage. While out deep, make sure that you lean on the trolling motor and always face into the wind. So anyways, guys, that is my tip for today as far as boat positioning. Hopefully this helps you. If you have any questions, comments, drop a comment below. Other than that, make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out on the water. Stay safe and trust the process.